The restaurant lights were dim and golden, casting a warm glow over the Friday night crowd. The clinking of cutlery, the low hum of conversation, and the soft melody of a piano filled the air. But for Daniel, a single father and head waiter at this upscale downtown restaurant, none of it mattered as much as the empty space in his chest where dreams used to live. At 32, life had already taken more than it had given: a wife lost to illness, a career in music abandoned for steady pay, and a heart that beat only for his 9-year-old daughter, Lily. He had no time for himself, until she walked in. Her entrance silenced the room. Not because she was glamorous in the traditional sense, but because of the quiet gravity she carried. Eleanor Whitmore, daughter of Charles Whitmore, one of the most ruthless and celebrated CEOs in the city, moved like a shadow through light, a long silk shawl draped over the side of her face, barely concealing the burned scars that traced her jawline and neck. Some whispered she'd survived a house fire years ago, others speculated a tragic accident. Whatever the story, people rarely looked at her for long, and when they did, it wasn't with kindness. Daniel noticed her right away, not because of her scars, but because of the loneliness that clung to her like a second skin. He'd seen that same loneliness in his own reflection too many times. She sat at a private corner table with her father, Charles, a man whose presence commanded attention the way a storm commands the sea. Charles Whitmore was all sharp suits, sharper eyes, and a pride so thick it suffocated the air around him. He was known for building empires and breaking people, sometimes in the same breath. That night, a live band played softly in the corner as couples drifted to the small dance floor. Daniel's duties pulled him between tables, but he couldn't help glancing toward Eleanor. She sat stiffly, her eyes fixed on the dancers with an ache that was almost painful to watch. Her father, meanwhile, barely looked up from his phone, as though the music, the night, even his own daughter were beneath him. When Daniel approached their table with a polite smile, Charles barely acknowledged him. "Sparkling water, no ice," he barked without looking up. Eleanor, however, met Daniel's gaze with cautious eyes. Up close, he saw how striking she truly was. Not despite her scars, with them. They told a story of survival, of someone who had been through fire and refused to let it consume her. As the evening wore on, the band shifted to a slow, soulful tune. Couples held each other close, swaying as if the world outside had melted away. Eleanor's eyes lingered on the dance floor again. Daniel noticed her fingers twitch slightly against her lap, as if she longed to move but didn't dare. And then, something inside Daniel stirred. Maybe it was the way she looked so achingly left out. Maybe it was the ghost of his late wife reminding him that life is too short for fear. Maybe it was just the music, but before he could second-guess himself, Daniel set down his tray and stepped toward her. "Would you like to dance?" he asked gently, his voice low enough that only she could hear. The table went still. Eleanor froze. Charles slowly raised his head, his eyes narrowing in cold disbelief. "She doesn't dance," he said sharply, his tone a wall meant to end the conversation. But Daniel didn't look at Charles. He kept his eyes on Eleanor, offering a quiet, patient smile. For a moment, Eleanor's gaze flickered between the man standing before her and the father who had spent years deciding the limits of her life. Her heart pounded. No one had asked her to dance since the accident. No one had dared. Her scars, her father's shadow, they were walls no one wanted to climb. Something in Daniel's eyes told her this wasn't pity. It was an invitation to live. Her hand trembled as she placed it in his. Charles' jaw tightened, his pride like a live wire sparking against the air, but Eleanor stood. A hush fell over the room as Daniel led her to the dance floor. Whispers rippled across the restaurant. The scarred girl is dancing with the waiter, but the music drowned them out. At first, Eleanor moved stiffly, unsure of herself. Daniel guided her with a gentle steadiness, his touch respectful and unhurried. "Just follow the music," he whispered. Not the eyes. Something inside her cracked open. Each step, the weight of years, the stares, the isolation, the cruel words she'd overheard, began to lift. For the first time since the accident, she wasn't defined by the marks on her skin. She was just a woman, moving to a song. And then, something extraordinary happened. Halfway through the dance, the band shifted seamlessly into a melody Daniel recognized. It was their song, his and his late wife's, a tune he hadn't heard in years. His chest tightened, but he held steady. Eleanor looked up, sensing the change in his breathing. Their eyes locked, and in that moment, it wasn't about scars or status. It was about survival, about love, about second chances. Across the room, Charles watched, his phone forgotten. He had spent years shielding his daughter from the world, believing that control could protect her. But as he saw her laugh, really laugh, for the first time in years, something inside him shifted. Pride, The very thing he'd built his empire on began to crack. He had been so consumed by the image of perfection that he'd forgotten the simple beauty of happiness. When the music ended, the room erupted in soft applause. Eleanor's cheeks flushed, not from embarrassment but from something far sweeter, life. Daniel bowed slightly, heart pounding as she smiled, a smile that outshone every scar. Charles rose slowly, his expression unreadable. For a long, tense moment, he simply stared at Daniel. Then, in a voice rougher than anyone had ever heard, he said, "Thank you." It wasn't just gratitude. It was surrender. In the weeks that followed, something remarkable unfolded. Charles began to loosen the iron grip he had over Eleanor's life, allowing her to attend art classes and social events she had once only dreamed of. Daniel continued to see Eleanor, their bond deepening with every shared conversation and quiet walk. Lily, Daniel's daughter, adored her, often dragging Eleanor into giggly dance sessions in the park. Of course, challenges remained. Gossip followed them. Charles struggled to balance his instinct to protect with his newfound respect for Eleanor's independence. Daniel wrestled with fears of inadequacy. Could a single father and a waiter truly belong in the world of a CEO's daughter? But together, they faced each obstacle with honesty and heart. Months later, at a charity gala hosted by the Whitmore Foundation, Eleanor took the stage to speak about beauty, resilience, and love. Her father watched from the front row, tears glistening in eyes that had once only known ambition. Daniel stood beside Lily, his hand over his heart, as Eleanor's voice rang clear and strong. "Scars," she said, "hair not flaws. They are proof that we survived. They are reminders that love, real love, sees more than skin. It dances with the soul." The audience rose in a standing ovation. Charles rose too, not as a CEO, but as a father who had finally learned the greatest lesson of all: pride builds walls, but love tears them down. And somewhere in the crowd, Daniel smiled, knowing that a single dance had changed 3 lives forever. To message life will scar us, sometimes on the outside, sometimes within. But scars are not the end of our story. They are the beginning of courage, proof that love is stronger than fear, and a reminder that happiness is worth every step, every song, every dance.